All right, that ends our commission business. So we are going back to green theory in hopes that Commissioner Simkowitz can get on as soon as possible. Although I do have a statement for him. If you want, we have a lot of people in this meeting. So I would first like to say thank you all for coming. I hope that we can keep our comments thoughtful and respectful tonight, as we always do. How this will go is we are going to introduce the motion for what is on our agenda. The commissioners will all have a chance to speak. Then we will open this up to the public, and we're going to ask people at first to raise your hand if you live within inside ANC 3D. And then we are going to hear from people who are affiliated through whatever other means through ANC 3D. And we are going to give everybody a chance to say something or ask questions, but there are a lot of people, so we may be asking people to keep it fairly short. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Horn to start with that motion, and then we will start our discussion.
So,
oh, you went back to mute.
thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the letter and the settlement agreement that has been on our website. And if I get a second, then I'd like to give an explanation.
Commissioner Nowak made a second, and you have the floor for an introduction.
Okay. So as the ANC commissioner for this area and as an attorney, I'd like to explain what the DC law is and how it works. First, looking back, DC voters legalized the recreational use of marijuana in 2015 in a citywide referendum called Initiative 71, or I-71. Legalization won by a 2-to-1 vote, including 60% in favor in the Palisades. Medical cannabis had already been legal before that, and at this point now, DC has had licensed medical cannabis stores for more than a decade. In every year since 2014, that is even before I-71, Congress has passed an appropriations amendment called the Harris Rider, forbidding the city from regulating recreational marijuana, but allowing the regulation of medical marijuana. As a result of I-71, more than 100 marijuana businesses have opened through what's called a gifting system. These unlicensed I-71 stores operate on the idea that customers can buy a non-cannabis item like a stick of gum and receive cannabis gifted to them for free. In fact, for some time, we have had an I-71 store, a gifting store, selling marijuana and edibles above the Little China Cafe on MacArthur Boulevard. So looking to close down the I-71 stores, the mayor and city council needed a process that complies with both the congressional restriction on the one hand and Initiative 71 on the other, which really restricts them. So the city enacted legislation last year, which is designed to open, frankly, a lot of licensed medical cannabis stores in order to close down a lot of unlicensed gifting stores. And in fact, our local gifting store closed last weekend. And I think it's fair to say it was closed because of green theory and a proactive landlord siding with green theory. So how does this new legislation regulate medical cannabis stores? it does it through the same agency that regulates liquor. In fact, the city changed the agency's name to the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration. Nearly all of the laws governing where a medical cannabis store can be located are very similar or identical to the laws for locating a liquor store. As some of you may know, there's a rule about medical cannabis stores being at least 300 feet from a school. That comes almost word for word from the pre-existing law that keeps new liquor stores at least 400 feet away from schools. And I have no idea why the city decided that a cannabis store could be 100 feet closer to a school than a liquor store, but that is what the law says. There is a separate provision that schools or daycare centers located in a commercial zone do not count in the 300-foot distance rule. Some say that, this must be a mistake, but no, it is. It's intentional. It's quite intentional. The city council knew exactly what they were doing. This is word for word a duplicate of the rule for liquor stores. That's how they locate liquor stores. So that's how they locate cannabis stores. These distance rules and the fact that cannabis retailers can't be in residential zones mean that cannabis and liquor stores would tend to be located in the same areas, like Green Theory and Addie Basson's. And that, I believe, is the city's intent here with these location rules. Finally, under city law, the ANC's grounds for objecting to a medical cannabis location are quite limited. I'll read you the entire section because it's so short. Section 7-1671.06AI says, this is the whole section, the grounds for a protest filed by an affected advisory neighborhood commission shall relate to the impact of the unlicensed establishment on 1, peace, order, and quiet in the relevant area, 2, residential parking needs and vehicular and pedestrian safety, and 3, real property values. That is the whole section. That is what we're directed, that's the grounds for protest. And we're governed by that particular language because it is, again, almost identical to the language for liquor establishments. The bottom line is that DC intended to regulate cannabis the same way that they regulate liquor. And the DC law strongly implies that if a location is okay for a liquor store, that it's okay for a cannabis store. And we already have a liquor store across the street. I should add that in 2022, the prior ANC 3D commissioners approved two medical cannabis store proposals on MacArthur Blvd, both of them in the neighborhood of the Starbucks, but neither of them actually opened. I am not saying that ANC 3D couldn't oppose the application of Green Theory, but in my opinion, and reading this law for quite a while now, reading it over and over, in my opinion, the city would license it anyway, that we don't have the grounds to successfully object. And that is why I believe the best thing we can do is approve the settlement agreement with Green Theory. Because in order to get a settlement agreement, you have to agree. Now, lastly, personally, I don't have a problem with licensed medical cannabis stores. Cannabis is legal in DC, and a licensed seller is much, much better than an unlicensed one. But I and every other commissioner sincerely want to hear everyone's ideas and concerns. I hope that you will be kind enough to understand that all of the commissioners, even when we disagree among ourselves, are really trying to do the best we can for our community. And that's why we do what we do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to let all of the commissioners know, after we've heard from members of the public, you will be able to speak again. But if you wanted to say something now, you could, and you would also be given an opportunity at the end. Would anyone, Commissioner Nowak?
Thank you. I am looking forward to hearing from the public, but I think it is important to clear up some misinformation which was on the listserv today. And I think that as commissioners, it is incumbent upon us to not allow this to be repeated as fact as we go forward. So let me highlight some of the things that were stated and why they are incorrect. So the first one, there is a reference to the Secure DC bill and the expansion of the drug-free zones as part of that. And this stores like this were part of the mayor's concept in reducing crime. In fact, the mayor spoke specifically that drug-free zones will help enforce the rules neighbors want related to loitering and open air street drug markets. This is a quote from the mayor, "It is the street sales of weed and the related violence that we need to fight against." Okay, so that's about the drug-free zone specifically in that bill. The second thing that was mentioned today, and this was a question as opposed to misinformation, but I'll just answer the question, is will this store be able to sell vapes or nicotine products?
You didn't send it to me. The link wasn't there.
In fact, the store is prohibited by statute from selling nicotine products. The next one was the idea of what I'll call marijuana tourism, that all of Maryland and Virginia are going to be overrunning MacArthur Blvd so that they can buy their marijuana. There are a couple of points about that. Maryland legalized marijuana sales on July 1st, 2023. Virginia legalized it on July 1st of 2022. And it remains illegal to bring marijuana across state lines. The bottom line, though, is they don't need to come to the Palisades to buy the marijuana because they can do it in their own neighborhood. To that point, I think that although this wasn't stated explicitly, there is some concern that people will come from other parts of DC into our quiet little Palisades hamlet to buy their marijuana. There are medical dispensaries in every ward in the city. There is no reason for people to cross town to come and disturb our peace and buy their marijuana here. In fact, this commission has spent hours bemoaning the D6 bus service and our lack of public transportation. It's not easy to get to MacArthur Blvd from basically anywhere else. So the clientele of this store will be neighbors, okay? Finally, there was a citation, there are 2 points. There was a citation on the listserv today about a University of Colorado, Denver, that talked about substantial increases of crime in the locations of where dispensaries are located. I'm not refuting that study took place, though I would point out a University of Albany study that studied crime around dispensaries in the District of Columbia. We don't need to study crime in Colorado because PhDs in Albany studied crime in DC. The study concludes, and I quote, "The preponderance of evidence in Washington, DC shows that medical marijuana dispensaries have no criminogenic effect on the surrounding area." Finally, there has been much talk about the daycare centers and the elementary schools that are in the neighborhood. We all want to keep our children safe. But remember what the owners of Green Theory told us and what the law in DC requires in terms of admission into their store. You need a driver's license. You need a medical cannabis card, which is issued by the district. You need to show those items in order to enter an airlock lobby. Once you enter that airlock lobby, those cards will be scanned by a machine that reads them to make sure that they are valid. Once you have done that, you will pass, and assuming they're both valid, you will pass an armed police officer that is acting as a security guard, but is on hire from NPD. There was a poster who referenced that he has teenagers, and he was quite confident that teenagers buy fake IDs and go into stores like this. I am also the parent of now not teenagers anymore, but recently not teenagers, and I cannot speak as to whether they've used fake IDs. But what I am confident saying is that they would not walk past an armed MPD officer with their fake ID. So that's all addressing teenagers. But if the hue and cry is around daycare children and elementary school children, I think we can all agree that they're not going to get past those steps if they are 3 years old or third graders or sixth graders. Because while we might not be able to tell an 18-year-old from a 21-year-old, I think that we can probably tell the difference between a 21-year-old and an 8-year-old. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nowak. Commissioner Davis.
Can I just add, thank you, Commissioner Nowak, for that very comprehensive review of what transpired today. There was a lot of discussion on the listserv about it, and we welcome the discussion. This is a good thing. And I just wanted to add, because there also appeared to be some confusion on the listserv about the legality of consuming cannabis in public. So to be very clear, it is illegal to consume cannabis in public, both smoking and eating it. Green Theory has assured us that they'll be prohibited from smoking inside the establishment and out front. And the DC law is laid out very clearly. I'll post a link in the chat if people would like, that it's illegal, it is a crime to consume cannabis in parks, streets, alleys, sidewalks, in a vehicle, or anywhere in which the public is invited. So we understand people are going to break the law. We smell it all the time. Drives me crazy. I hate it. But it is the law. So we will, we have no powers of enforcement as the ANC, but we do have the ability to encourage our police officers and other law enforcement apparatus to ensure that the laws in our community are followed and enforced. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone, Commissioner Elkins?
I appreciate the comments of my fellow commissioners. I think they're helpful to the discussion. And I look forward to hearing what others say. I did have a couple of questions that might help the discussion if people know the answers to this. Does this facility, excuse me, let me restate it. What is the nature of the, or the form rather, of the marijuana that is going to be sold in this facility? Will it be in the form of, I think they call them gummies, or will it, or will it be in the form of cigarettes? Or will it be in some other form? I think people are concerned, if I understand it, about people coming out of the facility and using the marijuana in the front of the facility. And I think I would be interested to know what is the form that they are taking home, and is it possible to light up immediately as they come out the door?
I think that Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, it is my understanding that they will sell a number of different media, but the cannabis which can be smoked is sold in bulk, and the users would have to roll it themselves. So I do not believe it is the practice to sell it pre-rolled. So at a minimum, there'd be an intermediate step where the user would have to roll it themselves.
So I am not sure we know this because it's so highly regulated. I would at some point like that question answered from the applicant who is here. So I will be calling him up in a second. Because I think that is something that people might be interested in. I have a comment unless there's anyone else. Commissioner Clone Roosevelt, did you want to talk?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I
Okay.
think that there has been a lot of talk on the listservs about like our settlement agreement and the idea that we should just reject the green theory outright. But I do feel that like a rejection we have is likely not going to be something that holds before ABCA, and the settlement agreement is the best way for us to actually enforce regulation on this dispensary and make sure that we have a good agreement with them in our neighborhood. And so I think what Commissioner Horn has done on the settlement agreement has been great. I would love to hear more about the security at the dispensary and how they're planning on. I know part of the settlement agreement was that they would patrol the plaza around the dispensary to make sure that people weren't, using marijuana, edibles, smoking, whatever, around there. I would love to hear more about that because I would like to, ensure that this is a settlement agreement that they'll adhere to at the outset. But I do think that it does address most of the concerns that I personally had with the dispensary being, so close to, schools and other neighbors and, just in our community. I think the settlement agreement does do a lot to address that, but I would love to hear more about how they plan on fulfilling it. So.
Okay, so I'm seeing some stuff in the chatter. So before we go to public comments, I am going to call Mr. Martin to unmute to answer some questions around the security, because we do address that in our settlement agreement, and maybe we will end up reading that out. I do want to let members of the community, because I talked to some people today, many people today personally, and I wanted to let everyone know about this other cannabis shop, Capital Remedy Group, and what the ANC has done, because I think it is important for the community to know that we are looking out for the community. So Commissioner Horn discovered by walking by that there was a gifting shop open in Palisades. And when I say it was open, I have been there I've walked by on a nice day and the door is literally wide open. It is right next to where the Green Theory space is, and it's been operating for quite some time. They have between 20 and 30 people walking in and out of that store with their marijuana purchases, and it's been going on for several months. One of the things with this new law is that you can only have so many of these dispensaries within a certain close to each other. And perhaps Mr. Martin can tell us what that is, because I can't remember at the time. But because Green Theory, which wants to operate this as like a locked door dispensary, put their application into ABCA, we were able to get rid of that Capital Remedy store because they had also gone in and put their application, but because Green Theory had their application in first, they got dinged and said that they couldn't. So and I, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Horn, but I think you walked by there today and they are indeed closed as of today. Shockingly, they have listed another location where they're operating, which I don't even know how they're doing that. But I think in terms of the operation that is safest for kids in the community and our environment there, having a retailer with a locked door that requires ID, security cameras, a whole security protocols. They've already been in contact with Metropolitan Police is far better than this sort of free for all that's been going on there. And I just want to point out to the public that it was Commissioner Horn who got that I-71 store shut down, and that was no small feat. So I would like to add that. Commissioner Horn?
Yeah, really the landlord deserves the credit. She was proactive on this and got it done.
Terrific. Can we call Mr. Robert Martin? He is a partner in this application. He's the primary applicant. If you could just unmute. There you go. So we have some questions for you, and then I'm going to let you off the screen. We'll hear the comments, and we'll be writing down questions to possibly have for you at the end. But if you keep your camera on, that's great if you want to talk. All right. So our first question was, what kind of product are you allowed to sell?
First off, thank you all for taking the time out of your Wednesday to join and hear us out. I think it's the fourth, whether it be private meeting or ANC or PCA meeting that we've joined. And we really pride ourselves on being approachable and transparent. So we appreciate the opportunity to address any concerns that the community has. So far as product mix, there's no real limitation in terms of the consumption method. So being a medical facility, we also need to cater to our customers. There are plenty that are not able to smoke that would like an edible form or a tincture form or something that they could cook with. So there will be cannabis flower sold along with tinctures, along with edible products as well.
And then what are the laws and regulations about any of these edibles and what they look like?
So there's actually laws governing that no marketing can target children. So there's not going to be Snicker bars or Starburst themed packaging in the store. If you've ever shopped at a medical cannabis dispensary in DC, the packaging is very bland, very medicinal looking. It tends to be really catered to where did this come from? What's the name of it? Who bought it? What is the strain? And that's really it. The laws state that there can really be no almost creative marketing, I would say, and that's by design.
And then are you allowed to sell any like paraphernalia, like vape pens or like other smoking things?
Nicotine products, there will be no cigarettes, there will be no vaporizers of anything of that nature.
Okay, and then there seems to be some confusion, and we might have to read the language in the settlement agreement, but could you tell us what kind of security personnel you are going to have there?
Sure. And Commissioner Nowak, I appreciate you breaking this down. By law, we are not required to have on-site security at all. My point through my previous presentations was that if we wanted to have armed security personnel, they would need to be licensed with the MD SOMB office. But again, that is not a requirement that we have to have armed security or personnel at all. That was something that we floated to the community, and we welcome feedback on that as well. We initially thought that that might be something that would make the community feel safer, but we're open to feedback around that because, again, we are not required to have any sort of on-site security personnel.
Before, if someone could look up what is in, well, I'm going to pull it up here in a minute. Commissioner Elkins, did you have a question?
Thank you. With regard to the products, will one of your products be a product that someone could walk out the door and in violation of the law, light up what I would call a cigarette, but it's not, I guess, technically a cigarette, but a marijuana in the form of a cigarette? Is that something that would be physically possible?
Yes, we would be permitted to sell products of that nature.
So I think the question is, what can we do to assure the community that this will be unlikely to happen?
From our perspective, we've committed to both verbally and then also in the settlement agreement to police and patrol the immediate surroundings as best we can. And I'd also like to put it out to the public that The folks with the most vested interest in reducing diversion, in reducing or creating a as near zero chance of public consumption as possible, probably only second to the neighborhood itself, is green theory. We have to comply to survive. So from a settlement agreement to agreements made with the surrounding business owners, it is in our business imperative that we comply with those laws and do everything we possibly can to make sure that there's no public consumption.
So let's assume hypothetically, one of your customers buys, I'm going to call them cigarettes. What should I call it?
In the industry, they're called pre-rolls.
Pre-rolls. Okay, so they buy those and they walk out the door, and before they even leave the plaza in front of your establishment, they light up. Now, what's the, what's going to happen in that case? I mean, how can people be assured that children walking by are not going to be exposed to that?
So a member of the staff would personally confront them. We would also immediately call MPD and report that person.
Okay. Good. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
I would like to nail down before we get to public comments on security. I know you're not open yet. Commissioner Horn, did you have a comment? You're still muted.
Okay, if you want me to read the security section of the settlement agreement, it'll just take 30 seconds. The applicant commits to meeting all security requirements required by ABCA. This shall include 24/7 video surveillance of both the interior and exterior of the property. The applicant commits to apply to the DC Office of Victim and Justice Grants private security rebate program to ensure adequate exterior surveillance coverage. The applicant's property shall remain locked during all operating hours. Customers will only be allowed entry after presenting valid photo ID confirming that they are above legal age to enter the facility. Upon entry in the facility, all customers will have their ID electronically scanned to ensure its authenticity and that the photo and accompanying information matches the customer. All customers will be required to present their DC Medical Cannabis patient card along with a valid photo ID. If a customer needs assistance with registering for their card, the staff member will assist, but no customers will be permitted on the sales floor without a valid patient card. Customers will be asked to leave the premises if they do not comply. On-site security will be provided by licensed security contractors.
So the licensed security contractors doesn't necessarily mean they will be armed, but if they are armed, you had said in your presentation, they have to be certified through, what was it?
DC SOMB, which is the Security Officer Management Division. For example, my local CVS went from having a contract with an armed security provider. They lost that contract. I then saw the security guard that used to patrol my CVS at a Walgreens. And now we have unarmed security at my local CVS. So the only difference being is that all of these security contractors have to be licensed with the district. Only ones that are registered or off-duty police officers registered through SOMB are permitted to be armed.
Okay, so it is not a fact that we don't know if there's going to be an off-duty police officer there as a security person yet. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Again, the way that the security requirements are written for licensed medical dispensaries, the only requirement is that if you are using armed security, they must be through MPD's SOMBD division.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll try and nail that down, some of that language before the end. Commissioner Elkins, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I'm just looking at the chat, and I know we want to hear from the community, but to the extent we can clarify some things before people speak, I think it is helpful. We're not trying to foreclose people's comments here, but am I clear that you will not be selling what normally people call gummies, which are any, and not just the shape of a gum, but anything that looks like candy, or maybe that's not broad enough, but could you answer that?
Sure. So we will be selling edible cannabis products that may be in the form of a lozenge that you suck on. It may be in the form of honey that you could infuse into tea. There's different consumption methods underneath that edible category. How medical cannabis is packaged is very discreet. So if you've bought lozenges from District Cannabis, which is a licensed medical grower and manufacturer, you get a white bag, and then inside of that are individually white opaque wrapped lozenges that you can take and suck on. So there's no overt packaging. There's no Starbursts that have THC infused in them. So we're within our right to sell edible products, but there will be nothing that is impersonating something that it's not.
And I think this question is for my second question and final question, and perhaps for Commissioner Horn. There's a question in the chat about what happens if this applicant violates the settlement agreement.
The settlement agreement, if we adopt it and it meets the ABCA requirements, which we've worked very hard to make sure that it does meet their requirements, will be adopted by the ABCA board and therefore enforceable by ABCA. And so the settlement agreement has the force of the enforcement agency, and people can make complaints to ABCA, and ABCA can investigate and enforce.
I would also like to point out one thing in the chat. Someone has asked, why is the ANC making an exception for the proximity to the schools here? And I think that correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Horn, but it's the law that makes the exception. We're not making law here.
Yes, this exclusion for daycare centers or schools that are within 300 feet is not an exception by us, and it's not an exception by ABCA. It is built into the statute. This is the law that exception exists. And the reason why that exception exists is that it is identical, word for word identical, with the exception for liquor.
I want to go back briefly to the enforcement mechanism for ABCA, just to highlight that this would be the same enforcement mechanism and complaint mechanism if you had a restaurant or bar in your neighborhood that was noisy, or that was selling alcohol to minors, or was serving after the statutory closure time, that they do so at the risk of their liquor license. And similarly, if there are a number of complaints coming into ABCA against any given dispensary, they do so at the risk of their license to operate. So again, similar to the liquor laws.
I would like to also talk about the settlement agreement, because I know that I've talked to several neighbors about what kind of things we wanted to put into the settlement agreement. And ABCA has also come back to us and said, there's a number of things that you can't put in there. So for example, we talked to Mr. Martin about not having a smoke garden or a smoke room. We can't put that in the settlement agreement, but I'm hoping Mr. Martin can tell me I'm right here. They have said that they don't want one of these things, but if they were, they would have to apply for a different license, and we would be able to oppose that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there are two types of on-site consumption license endorsements. So we would have had to apply for a retail cannabis license and then have endorsements for a summer garden, which is the same verbiage used to govern rooftop bars and outdoor alcoholic consumption. We've never really had any interest in doing that. And the other one is a safe use treatment facility where we would have actually built into our space private ventilated rooms for people who didn't want to either smoke at their home or wanted to consume cannabis in a more private or controlled environment. We purposely did not pursue those license types because we thought it would impact the community, and it's also just not the type of business that we're interested in running.
There was another thing, just real quick, Commissioner Simkowitz is here. Catherine, if you can make him a co-host and spotlight him, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Another thing that we had talked about at the PCA meeting was doing regular community meetings. And we are not allowed to put that in the settlement agreement, or else they will reject it. But you and I have spoken, and you have already met with some community people, but can we get a sort of a verbal agreement to you that if we ask you to come and meet, that you will be willing to do this?
Absolutely. We've been as transparent as possible. We've been engaged with the ANC for, I believe, 4 to 5 months now. We've spoken to what I understand is the heads of all of the local schools, and we are completely open to continuing those dialogues, both routinely or if individual complaints or comments or feedback happen in real time.
Commissioner Simkowitz, if you can hear me, thank you for hopping on.
I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to give
Thank
you an idea. So the motion is on the floor for the letter and the settlement agreement. We are in the process of the commissioners asking questions. We are going through some of the questions that are coming up from the chat. We are going to give all of the commissioners a chance to speak now and at the end. And once we finish up this, we're going to open it up to members of the public.
Okay, I'll wait till the end. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other commissioners, and I have not read the chat, if anyone sees something there that needs to be addressed before we move to members of the public? And did we lose Commissioner Cologne Roosevelt?
I'm still here. I just had to turn
Oh, you're
the camera
still
off.
here. Okay.
Don't
Okay.
worry.
No problem. No problem. No problem. Sorry. I just want to make sure we've got everybody here. Okay. I would very much, it's very helpful for people to raise their hand. And I only see one hand raised, so I'm going to call on Laura. And if you could please say how you are affiliated or connected to this. If you live in ANC 3D, you live in the neighborhood, we would like to hear you. And then I am going to be, we're all going to be taking notes. If you have questions, we're going to let Mr. Martin, we're going to unspotlight you right now. And we're going to come up with a list of questions as people talk that I hope that we can get clarified at the end. Does that sound good to the rest of the commission?
Madam Chair, can I just ask that we prioritize ANC 3D residents before anybody else who is not a resident?
Yes, that was actually a
I can
request.
confirm. Yeah, I am a 3D resident.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Okay, so up first, I'm going to go in order of my thing here. Miss Martinez Sullivan, you're up.
Thank you.
I think you called on Laura first.
She unraised her hand. She unraised her hand. So
I think I took it down because you called on me.
Oh, I'm
She's
so
had her hand up for a
sorry.
long time.
All right, I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan. I am going to go with Laura because she had raised her hand first. I'm very sorry.
And thank you, Trish. I appreciate this has been really helpful, and all the questions you've outlined have been incredibly helpful. And One of the things I found very helpful in the discussion is Commissioner Horn's reading of the law, because I think that is really important to focus on here is the law. And when I hear that, you know, there is a caveat that if there's going to be or a carve out that there's going to be an effect on peace and order and property values, I mean, to me, that's a red flag, right? Because I think we're living a little bit out of reality if we think that this is going to be, you know, kumbaya and that we're going to have a great clientele hanging outside of Green Theory. I think my chief concern, having two young kids in the area, is not necessarily that I'm worried they're going to go through. And I did not appreciate the misinformation that Commissioner Norwalk included on having, you know, this high level of security and her children wouldn't go past a MPD police officer, because that's not accurate, right? Martin hasn't agreed that there would be an MPD police officer. We have agreed, I think, in the settlement agreement that there'll be a security officer. But I mean, I think anyone shopping in Georgetown can see there's quite a wide berth of what a security officer can kind of entail. So I think my chief concern is the level of crime. And I think that we can look at studies. We can look at studies in, you know, out of New York, in DC. We can look at studies in Colorado. I think if we actually kind of talk to our neighbors in our community about how things have gone already in the other wards, we can see that there is an increase of crime. And there might be, you know, a lot of guarantees when someone comes into a space. But the fact is people are going to go outside and they are going to light up, and we're going to have people sitting in their cars. I think we've all experienced that. And it's just not going to be additive to our beautiful hamlet that is the Palisades.
Okay,
And I think,
thank you,
yeah.
Laura. We have a lot of people. I am going to address the security issue at the end, because I have spoken to MPD about this in and around, and the difference between the I-71 stores and the dispensaries. But we really appreciate your comments, and we are taking them to heart. Thank you. Miss Martina Sullivan, you're up.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm a Palisades resident and the parent of two young children attending Our Lady of Victory, which is directly across the street from the proposed dispensary. I'm also an executive at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. So we spent 25 years fighting to regulate the tobacco industry and other commercial interests in the business of addicting children and young people. So I'm drawing on my professional experience at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, although I'm here in my personal capacity tonight. History's littered with well-meaning people trying to choose the lesser of two evils, including choosing to believe the tobacco companies when they said they weren't marketing products to children. So in the case of Green Theory, we're being led to believe that we have to choose between the lesser of two evils, endorsing Green Theory as a medical marijuana dispensary or having unlicensed pot retailers in our neighborhood. It's a false choice because there should be no weed stores, licensed or otherwise, in such close proximity to our daycare centers and our elementary and middle schools. And the members of our sister ANC, ANC2C, agree, as they recently issued a letter opposing the application of a cannabis retailer on the basis that there are 3 schools located within 300 feet of the proposed location. So there is precedent for ANCs opposing this kind of business. The dangers of having such a store sell highly addictive products to children with one of the highest concentrations of children in the Palisades is real. And it's clear that this establishment, I think, will have a detrimental impact on peace, order, and quiet in the area. And I really urge the ANC commissioners to educate themselves on the impact of youth cannabis use, including the fact that youth cannabis use is associated with increased traffic deaths in drivers among ages 15 to 20. So we're also led to believe that the settlement agreement is going to address serious concerns about public safety that's been raised by the community. But in reality, we're trusting a business that has no discernible track record of being reputable or trustworthy or having any experience in running a medical marijuana dispensary. And history has shown time and time again that businesses tout self-regulation as a means of avoiding real regulation. So I would ask that the ANC withdraw its support for green theory, and I think doing so will send a strong message to the city council that DC has to do a better job regulating and restricting weed stores to protect children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm taking notes. Thank you. Mr. Fisher, you're up.
Thanks. And I think Lucy stole, a lot of the points that I was going to make. I think that was very eloquently said. Commissioners, thanks for being here. It does blow my mind that we're even having to talk about this and having to talk about and sort of arming the whole plaza, in front of what are 4 schools and about 7 different locations within about 400, 500 feet of this proposed location. It boggles my mind. So I would suggest maybe splitting the discussion or the dialogue into 2 pieces. One, to the commissioners of ANC 3D, and by the way, I should say, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a resident, almost 25 years of 3D. I have had 2 kids going through River, including a first grader there right now at this point, who had to smell a pot as he was going in at 8:20 in the morning, the other morning, with somebody standing right around outside where this location would be. So I would suggest the dialogue gets split into 2 pieces, one of which are the commissioners of ANC 3D setting the legal context aside, Commissioner Horn, because I agree it's important to understand, but setting that aside, is the city's position correct, and is this a rational thing to do? Number one, that's important to split that apart. Setting the legal issues aside, because frankly, you could drive a truck through the way some of the legal language in the legislation in the city at this point. The second piece of the discussion would be then, regardless of that, is there something that ANC 3D can do within the context of peace, order, quiet, parking needs, traffic, safety, real property values? And I would agree with both Laura and Lucy that I think this is fairly clear cut based on experience elsewhere. And I've done a little bit of research myself. I happen to know some folks who run these things outside of state, and so don't have a dog in this fight. And with all due respect to Mr. Martin, these dispensaries have negative impacts in that way. So I would say crime, delinquency, impact on children's health. Frankly, if green theory upheld to the best of its absolute ability the settlement agreement, it's not going to have an impact, because the increased traffic, once it gets outside of this store, anything's going to happen. And as has been pointed out, even today, there are people smoking right in front of the River School. And I don't want my 6-year-old, exposed to that sort of thing. I just think it's kind of silly. So maybe in conclusion here, again, a couple points. One, I would split the dialogue into those 2 pieces. And I'd be very interested in the commissioners' perspectives and points of view and positions on whether, setting the legal precedent aside or the legal interpretations aside, whether you are in favor of this or not. And then in the context of what are able to do, I would argue that actually there is a rational, and as Lucy said, there's precedent for actually challenging this to the city, and I would encourage ANC3 to do that. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually spoke to the commissioner over in 2C today, and I'll be addressing that at the end. I can tell you what he said. Mr. Barnes, hello, you're up.
Hey, Tricia. Hey, thanks for letting me share my thoughts here. Robbie, I wish you were still in the software business. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
So I've got 7 points I want to make. I'm concerned. First one, crime rates and community safety. I'm concerned that we'll be attracting undesirable elements and criminal activity into the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the potential for an uptick in crime, such as theft and robbery in the vicinity around the dispensary. Next, impact to minors. I'm concerned about the increased influence, exposure and access of cannabis for underage individuals that might lead to underage usage. And even the signature.
Mr. Barnes, you became muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Boy, I was on a soapbox there. Hey,
It was only the last 8 seconds. You're good.
Okay, very well. So I had mentioned the impact to minors. Next are property values. You know, I'm concerned about the potential decrease in property values due to the stigma associated with the cannabis dispensaries. Negative image. We're talking about the MacArthur corridor. I mean, July 4th celebrations, Sunday flea markets, assisted living right across the street for the elderly. I'm concerned about tarnishing the neighborhood's reputation and appeal to potential residents and new businesses. Quality of life. I'm concerned about littering that might occur, noise pollution, other nuances that associated with cannabis retail operations, legal and regulatory compliance. I'm uncertain about the ability of the dispensary to comply with all relevant laws and regulations that could potentially lead us to legal disputes and the expense of legal disputes. Alternative investments, surely we can bring resources and attention that could be directed towards other forms of economic development and community improvement projects that can be discussed besides cannabis retail operations right there in the heart of the Palisades. Lastly, I'm curious whether Green Theory business owners and their families live within the ANC. And then just the second one, wouldn't Green Theory be better served by locating near a physician's practice? You know, the retail spaces at Sibley Hospital or the medical building located at 3301 New Mexico Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes, very much. Next up is Lisa DeBow. Ms. DeBow, you're up.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. I used to be able to see the space that we're actually talking about tonight from this very office before the Safeway site was developed. So I am a close proximity neighbor to this area. I also have had children going to Our Lady of Victory School for over 10 years. So I have bulleted my points because a lot of previous commentators have already echoed some of them. So I'm going to try to be brief here. The intent of this 300-foot rule is to protect children. I don't think there's anyone who can argue that it is not. The intent to not have these dispensaries near children. And regardless of a lax law that doesn't match the liquor license or produces an absurd result in the case of the mixed use exemption, the intent is to keep children safe. And I cannot understand why we are ignoring that intent. This is the educational corridor of the Palisades. There is an early childhood education center that is within doors of this facility. Our Lady of Victory is within about 320 feet. And then there are 3 other schools that are within a 3 to 5 minute walk. So it is actually within the ANC's power to not support this on the basis of arguing that the city did not create great laws and they didn't create great regulations. And some of the regulations that they have put in place produce an absurd result, which is exactly what we're seeing here. And the ANC holds great weight in this discussion. We were told by ABCA that our ability to object to this use is through the channels of the ANC. So there seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy that we have to choose between the lesser evils because the law says we have to, or we can actually say, forget the laws because we don't think the laws are right. So that is what ANC 2C has done, at least in the letter that I read of what they sent to ABCA. And then the other thing is just, I mean, the mayor's report tonight talked about the level of crime in this city. My kids' classmates were all in CVS when that robbery took place last spring. And so there is a great concern among the parent community just about this use, whether it makes good sense to have it in this neighborhood. And then I just have a few points that I think from the settlement agreement, if if that still is under consideration, some points that should be considered. One is that there should be a minimum obligation of security during all operating hours. I also agree with the previous comment that this use should not be in a public setting among schools, but rather in a medical office building. No marketing to children was brought up. That should mean that there should be signage restrictions with no visual references in the windows and things like that. And then I also have a question in regards to the question about smoking rooms and gardens. About once Green Theory is, if they do open, can they then go back and apply for that second type of license? And is that possible? So thank you for my time tonight. And that's all I have.
Thank you. And I wrote down your concerns and we will definitely address them. Thank you. Up next is Ms. Martinez, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. So I would maybe just share, I am mother of Lucia, who also attends Our Lady of Victory. I am from Mexico, so I think I can talk about the experience of how these little steps makes a very big difference in terms of impact in young people, impact in children, just because seeing an experience with other adults or teenagers, having this access, even if it is legal, even if it is permitted, it's just a community impact that will have an important effect along the time. This community is safe. This community has had a very calm, I would say, family approach. And I don't understand why, if this is a business that can go to a place where they could have more and bigger market and also profit, why to come and disrupt a community that has schools from pre-K to middle school, and if I am not wrong as well, to high school, a public library, a public parks, now a new facility as well for grandparents. And all in all, during the days, all the parents who have children there have the confidence that there are strict measures around the community, and now everything will be disrupted in something that it's not under the settlement, because it's not enough what it is included in the settlement in terms of what is beyond the store. And I want to be a little bit realistic and want to bring more common sense as well to a situation that could be out of our hands at some point, because there should be co-responsibility outside of the store in a community which is very well integrated and which is proud of these family values, and is proud to have the security and the calm in the environment for all of these children to grow safe. So I really want to share this. I really look up for hearing more common sense to really bring this in a community that it's not at this time at the level of criminality rates that are increasing across DC. And I think it's really, I would say, impressive to see that this should be happening here, where there might not be the market right now, but could be expected in the time if we don't do anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Up next is Mrs. Fallhaber. Is that correct? Yep, go ahead. We cannot hear you, but you are unmuted. Perhaps your headset is not plugged in all the way.
Maybe, can you hear me now?
Totally, yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm a resident of ANC 3D, and I'm the mother of a young child who recently went to Little Ivy's, so right next door. And I first of all want to start by thanking the commissioners. It's very clear you've been thinking about this so seriously and have put a lot of effort into this. I want to thank Mr. Martin for coming and engaging with the community. I am going to support everything that all of the other community members said before me, and I just wanted to make a few points to echo and build on some of the things that they said. So in the letter from the ANC, it says that there are no concerns regarding peace, order, and quiet, or parking and vehicular safety, or real property values. But then when you get to the settlement agreement does nothing to address the first and the third issues. And it does very little to address the second issue. And I just want to point to that because
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
You have to wait until
everyone in
somebody puts
the-
something and click on
everyone
it.
who's
and
been
then-
talking about this thus far has been flagging that we as the community have very serious concerns about peace, order, and quiet. We have very serious concerns about crime. We have very serious concerns that the issue for children is not an issue about 3-year-olds wandering into this shop. It's an issue about the adults who wander into the shop and the effect that they have on the children who are attending the schools, who are going to the library, who are in the neighborhood. And if we have those concerns and our ANC is saying that they don't share those concerns in order to engage in a settlement agreement, because I understand this is a negotiation where you feel that you have more leverage with the settlement agreement needs to address those concerns. The same on the third point, the real property values. I care more about the safety of my child, but the real property values are affected by the crime. They're affected by the increase in vehicular traffic. They're affected by the increase in people who are smoking. And a point on both of those, I don't think that we're actually describing what happens when businesses like this move into the neighborhood. That's amazing news that it is illegal to smoke pot in public in Washington, D.C. Nothing based on my experience living in Washington, D.C. would lead me to believe that this is ever actually enforced. And so if we are actually looking at how these businesses affect the neighborhood, then we have to be thinking about how the ANC is engaging in a settlement that protects the peace, order, and quiet and the real property values. And even on the parking and vehicular safety, I'm concerned about what this increase in new traffic is going to do, again, to the children who are in the schools, to the children who are going to the library, and to the rest of the community. And I will say, I feel that my sense here is that there's this belief that we're just expecting that the city is going to license it anyway. And so this is the best that we can do. First of all, ANCs are really powerful, right? There are a lot of places where ANCs, universities are very strongly affected by when ANCs limit them. And as Lisa said, the ANCs have power. And also, if we actually just think that they're going to move forward with it, why not oppose it? Why not have the leverage in saying we opposed it? So then if they do a second application for something different, then the ANC is able to stand on that opposition. So I really appreciate the work that everyone's done. I'm sorry for taking so much time, and I really appreciate being an early part of this, and you're publicizing this so that all of us who are coming to this late are able to share our thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I took notes. We'll be addressing some of your comments. Miss Atanasio, hopefully I got that right. You're up.
Thank you. That was pretty close. Atanasio, Don Atanasio. I do live in the neighborhood. In fact, I live almost directly behind the store, or the proposed location for the store. So obviously I do have a interest in what the impact will be. A few things that there's a question raised in the chat about whether or not this will be an all cash business. That raises a concern for me because obviously if we have people traveling through this neighborhood carrying cash, a lot of cash, that raises the potential for crime. And that of course is a very serious concern for me. The second concern does go to the traffic. This is going to be a business where people come and go quickly and often. We often have people blocking the access to the alley, which opens up next to the Exxon station. And the fact that people are going to be coming here for quick trips is a concern. So I am very concerned about the level of traffic. I'm concerned about the level of traffic that gets pushed because people are parking there. They get pushed down onto our street, Reservoir Road, which is just behind. So I do hope that we will be able to address that in the agreement. I do understand, and I do want to thank Commissioner Horn for his very clear explanation about how the law works and why we feel limited here. And I do appreciate Mr. Martin coming here as well tonight. Another thing, though, that has not been addressed, we have talked a lot about the impact on children. There is a college campus half a mile away. And I doubt that that escaped the notice of Green Theory when they picked their location. But I'm going to be quite disturbed if we start seeing an influx of students traipsing down the hill, some of whom are 21, and heading back up the hill and creating that type of a nuisance for our neighborhood, and exacerbating a problem with college students becoming well, I know you say presumably you can't get addicted to marijuana, but certainly that is not always the case. And then the last point I had was, again, I would like us to assure that we're not just worried about people smoking on the plaza, but also in the alley, the area around it, the schools, the libraries. I do see this as being a neighborhood concern, and I am very concerned about the impact of this business on our property values because of the impact it would have on our neighborhood in terms of traffic, trash, again, people hanging around, consuming their products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I took some notes because we can address the traffic thing too. Up next is Miss Maya Salama. Hopefully I got that right. Hello.
Hi, sorry, I don't know, can you see me? Thank you. Hi, my name is Maya Salame. I live in the neighborhood as well. And I have two children who are middle schoolers at Our Lady of Victory School. When I heard about this, I was very concerned in terms of the immediate thought wasn't so much the security surrounding the establishment itself. And I do appreciate all the background work that's been done and all the presentations regarding that. But what I'd like to second is what some of the other people have referenced is what's going to happen in the surrounding area. So this is an area where I currently allow my kids to walk, with friends, on their own or not supervised. They walk from school to the library, to CVS. And I'm very concerned about letting them do that if this establishment is there. Again, based on what other people have raised in terms of the concerns of the clientele and the people hanging out. You just had a parent mention that his 6-year-old had to smell pot walking into school at River School. So I don't see how Green Theory would police what's happening in front of River School. They might be able to try to police what's happening in front of their establishment, but people will walk down to River School, to the public library, they'll smoke there. And I think that it's, I think we need to be realistic that this will happen. And if we're okay with that happening in this neighborhood with 4 schools and young kids walking around, then I think we need to say that we're okay with that. But, obviously, I don't think that the ANC is okay with that. And I think that we need to have a real frank discussion about it, and about what we really, what we want to do to protect our kids. And just one more point, there is a parent who lives in a different neighborhood who has had a medical dispensary open in their neighborhood. She couldn't be here tonight. She did write a letter to you guys, I believe, detailing what has happened in her neighborhood since the dispensary opened. Her children can no longer walk safely in the neighborhood. They can no longer go to the public library safely in the neighborhood. And I think the concerns and the experience of people in other parts of DC with this should be taken into account as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clarkson, you're up.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Thanks. This has been a great discussion. And I really, thanks to the ANC and the neighbors for, as usual, doing your homework and presenting some really compelling points. I just guess to add to what Maya just said about other perspectives from other communities. I mean, I was just thinking about Maryland, the example of Maryland, where in Maryland, it's legal. the dispensaries, anyone of age can go in without applying for and receiving a medical card from Montgomery County. Anyone, it's legal. And on Willow Lane in the town of Chevy Chase, literally steps from Elm Street Park and a 5-minute walk from the town of Chevy Chase Rec Center and Town Hall, is a dispensary, Columbia Care Dispensary. And I think it'd be very interesting to know what the experience for that community has been like. First of all, how it was approved, the level of community opposition, because there's some, I think the homeowners, I would guess, driving through that neighborhood, they care about their property values. After all, in Chevy Chase, they fight over dog parks. That's the Washington Post. They're pretty an active community. And so it would be very interesting to know how that dispensary, which presumably sells far more products, different kinds of products, cannabis products, than the medical dispensary, the Greenleaf would, how that's negatively impacted the community and what kind of opposition there's been since it was opened, I think almost a year ago. So I would just throw that out there, and it'd be helpful if anyone has any or knows anyone lives in that neighborhood and has been affected by that dispensary, because I just found it interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. Is there anyone outside of the neighborhood who would like to talk? Raise your hand. Yes, I would definitely like to call on Miss Fogel.
Oops. Sorry. Let me
Do you want me to
do
go
my
to-
video? Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. Just trying to get my video to work. I apologize. As the
You can just
property
keep it off.
manager of the building.
It's really
Sorry?
blurry. You can just keep it off if you want. It's fine.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And I'll post a letter. I apologize, I wasn't able to do so before, but I'd first like to thank the commissioners and the board members of the PCA for their work in helping the community navigate this very heated debate about dispensaries. As the property manager of the building, I'd like to offer some insight in regards to the questions and concerns. Ironically, last year, I met with one of the local educational institutions that wanted to lease the space in question, but they chose a different location. Although we were very hesitant about having a dispensary in the neighborhood at first, after meeting each of the owners of Green Theory and their family members, I can attest to the fact that they are deeply committed to creating a company that meets the legal requirements of such a business, as determined by ABCA. After speaking with them at great length about their business plan, it is evident to me that the safety of both children and adults is their priority, both inside and outside of the property. As they've mentioned several times, they will maintain a rigid ID check for each person entering the premises to ensure that no one under age 21 would be allowed inside. I know we've discussed several, we've already gone over the danger outside, but as we know, it's illegal outside on the patio. In addition, that patio belongs to the cafe below, Momo's Cafe. As for other age-restricted items in the neighborhood, I would like to point out that it is next to Our Lady of Victory, the CVS sells a variety of opioids to clients with a prescription and a valid proof of identity. It is ironic, one could point out, that one could judge Green Theory's objective to legally sell cannabis as dictated by the laws of the District of Columbia, when the opioids sold just next door to the school can be far more addictive and dangerous than cannabis. As for the fear that has been expressed about Green Theory's clientele, there are dozens of local residents who live and work near the Palisades who are cannabis users. They have shared their openness, even eagerness, to have a medical dispensary at this location. These people are not gun-wielding criminals, as many people seem to insinuate, but in fact, many of these people are parents of the children who attend the schools. Some of them are attorneys, doctors, local business owners, Army veterans, retired athletes, and or stay-at-home parents. Other local users include elderly neighbors who have severe pain from arthritis, cancer, muscular dystrophy, and degenerative disc disease. They are all from a diverse background. Their consumption is not linked to age, gender, race, religion, or economic status. So it is unfair to stereotype all users of cannabis as dangerous. All of the people mentioned above are part of our community. They visit the same stores and restaurants as the rest of us. They visit the farmers market on Sundays and attend local events, including the 4th of July parade. Yet there has been no violence or underage drug use because of these individuals that I personally know in the neighborhood. I believe that Green Theory's ownership group and their family members have been extremely conscientious about following the rules and regulations related to applying for their license and have been transparent about how they plan to carefully manage their company in full compliance with the local authorities and with a specific emphasis on safety. Parking and traffic concerns have been mentioned, and yet it would seem that traffic jams outside of the River School and Our Lady of Victory every morning and every afternoon are more impactful than the clientele of a small store such as a dispensary. Also, how can one ignore the toxic fumes from the dozens of cars that sit idling out front of the above-mentioned schools 5 days a week, and yet fear the faint smell of marijuana from a single individual to such an extent? While it is understandable that a resident, parent, teacher, and/or local business owner would be concerned about the location of a dispensary in the neighborhood, we cannot move forward as a community in a climate of fear and misguided assumptions. I believe the owners of Green Theory have demonstrated their willingness to operate in strict accordance with the laws that govern the District of Columbia, and they deserve the opportunity to apply for their dispensary license through ABCA. Thank you. I will post my email for further comments.
Thank you, Ms. Fogel, very, very much. Mr. Vasallo, Brian, hi, please, you're up.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the time. My name is Brian Vasallo, and I'm a parent of 3 at Our Lady of Victory School and a member of the School Advisory Board. The citizens and businesses of the district are paying the consequences of popular policies that do not put the safety of our residents and children first. Just watch the news every day. Changes to the district's medical marijuana regulations allow for self-certification. Because of this, what is being proposed will be a recreational retail store. This is not a medical marijuana store. The 300-foot separation of a marijuana dispensary to a school is nationally among the shortest. Furthermore, as we discussed, the APCA regulations give exceptions to the 300 feet separation in mixed-use commercial zones. This simply just does not make any sense. This is a unique site where a childcare center is less than 100 feet from the proposed business, and 4 schools, a public library, are located on the surrounding blocks. Many of the school children throughout the district rely on public transportation, which can often be a couple of blocks from the school. These regulations allow it to be acceptable for marijuana dispensaries to be located where we have large congregations of children. You have all campaigned on making our schools better, but to be honest, the message that you've communicated to the shared settlement shows little support for our schools. The mayor's initiatives to bring more people back into DC in mixed-use zones will make this situation more common. I applaud other ANCs who have taken a stand against such retailers next to school. It is my understanding that this topic is on the mayor's agenda for further review. I asked the ANC to protest this establishment at this location and do not set a precedent that puts the safety of our children and schools.
I lift my hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasallo. Thank you. Up next is Ha Wien Ha. Hi. Can you unmute?
Okay, it's off mute. Yes. Okay.
There you go. I hope I got that right. Sorry.
Yeah. So my name is Ryan Ha. Sorry, that's my Chinese name. So
Got
I'm
it.
the
Okay.
yeah. So I'm the son of the founder of Little China Cafe, which is actually like right next door. And I just want to say, and I was talking to my dad about the thing that something like a dispensary brings is it brings people into the neighborhood. So businesses such as ours, we would assume would get more business, right? And so for a mom and pop shop, we're not like a chain or anything like that. So I think we need to consider how like it can help auxiliary businesses. I also think I'd say rather on the younger side. Like, I think there's a misconception on cannabis culture in the community, as if it's like heroin or some type of drug that's it's very it's kind of it's a very in my experience, it's a very high functioning product. The same way lawyers go to happy hour every day after work. Cannabis, you got, kind of like what I think her name was Miss Martinez was saying. It's people in the community use it. And then the other thing I want to mark is what I don't think that something like a cannabis store is going to increase traffic. Now, growing up in that area, and I'm in Northwest now, DuPont, but MacArthur Boulevard is like a dangerous street in general. Like, we need to, if I'd say anything, we need to slow down cars there, like make more bike lanes or something to help people, because crossing that street has always been dangerous. Even as a kid, my dad would never let me do that by myself. But stores, especially like Little China Cafe, it doesn't cater to someone, say, in DuPont Circle. Someone in DuPont Circle isn't driving to MacArthur Boulevard and adding to the traffic to get their Chinese food, right? The stores in the neighborhood should service the people in the neighborhood, and it seems that there's overwhelming amount of community members that are legal cannabis users. Thanks for your time. I just, that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. That was a unique perspective. Thank you.
Right here.
Up next, Mr. Davis.
Hi, everybody. I was a resident of the neighborhood for about just under 10 years. I'm not now, but I have 2 small kids at Our Lady of Victory, and our family is a member of the parish there. So I do want to echo the statements of the people who were opposing this before me, and ask that the ANC 3D oppose this on the grounds that it's going to violate peace and order. So Commissioner Horn addressed the DC laws, and I think that's useful, but I think that the commissioners are overlooking 2 very important laws. First is 21 USC section 860. That's the federal drug-free school zone law. It applies to distributing federally controlled substances, including marijuana, within 1,000 feet of private or public schools. That law is still active. Nothing DC has done limits it or affects it in any way. There's federal preemption. And the other one is 18 USC section 371. That's the federal conspiracy statute. It outlaws conspiracy to commit any other federal crime, including violations of the federal drug-free school zone law. Now, conspiracy has 2 elements: an agreement, and the second between 2 or more persons. And again, this federal law is unaffected by anything DC has passed. Now, you circulated a draft settlement agreement between ANC 3D and Green Theory regarding opening their business selling federally controlled substances within the federal drug-free school zone. I would just strongly suggest that you each consult outside legal counsel about the potential personal federal criminal liability ANC 3D members might have for creating an agreement with Green Theory to violate the federal drug-free school zone law. Now, obviously, the current Department of Justice might not be inclined to pursue any charges on this sort of thing, but the statute of limitations for federal conspiracy is 5 years, and future departments of justice might feel differently. Thank you.
Commissioner Duncan, I have a question for Mr. Davis, if that's okay. Can you hear me?
If he's willing to answer, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that you file a protest yourself with the, when it goes before the board. In case we approve this tonight, I would encourage you also to file a civil lawsuit, challenging this, because I think somebody needs to. And that's a very, I didn't know about the what the laws that you cited. I know other federal laws, and that's why I'm opposed to this. But I think that you guys need to band together, and you guys need to get to work and protest this thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it's a legal fiction that's very popular that states or localities can do away with federal laws, but the federal laws.
Yeah, I mean, the supremacy of the United States is paramount, which is why I'm voting against this thing in the first place. But you brought up other points, the school law, which I didn't know about.
And just on that line, I think violating federal criminal law is itself violating peace and order. So I think that's all you need. Thank you.
I would
So I don't see any other hands raised. So we are back to the commission. I have a long list of things I'm going to go through, but I'm going to open it up to other commissions if anyone wants to. Commissioner Simkowitz, welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for the courtesy of scheduling this until I could appear. As many of you know, I was a volunteer attorney for Smoke Free DC when we were trying to make bars and restaurants smoke free here in the district, Maryland, and Virginia. Since DC, Maryland, and Virginia bars and restaurants went smoke free in 2007 and 2008, cigarette smoking plummeted, not just here, but around the country. More importantly, youth smoking fell to historic levels. Almost no children were smoking. We fast forward a couple years when a new product arrived in the market, vape pens. They arrived with zero regulation and were sold to children, and they contained nicotine, which made them super addictive. The progress that we made in society from stopping kids from smoking cigarettes abruptly stopped. The rate of children smoking vape pens exceeded the highest levels of children smoking ever recorded because it had easy availability and flavors such as bubblegum and cotton candy. This was a direct result of Congress and the states doing nothing to stop these dangerous products from being sold to adults, much less children. For years, we vigorously prosecuted people who smoked marijuana, and this resulted in criminal convictions that led to the incarceration of many people and prevented many people from getting jobs. It's quite possible that that was the wrong approach in retrospect. Maybe diversion to drug treatment would have been better than a criminal record, but that is why a few years ago, voters in the District of Columbia voted I think overwhelmingly to decriminalize marijuana. They could not legalize marijuana and had to decriminalize it because the federal government still lists marijuana as a controlled dangerous substance that is illegal to use, possess, or sell. Unfortunately, many, if not most states did the same thing as DC, and you can buy marijuana in retail stores all around the country. And I was in Oklahoma, of all places, around Thanksgiving, and that's a very conservative place. And I've never seen so many marijuana dispensaries as I saw there. Based on this trend, the DC government created a mechanism for marijuana retailers to open around the district, which is why Green Theory wants to open a brick and mortar store in the Palisades. They're following the rules established by the DC government, rules that I don't agree with at all. I've spoken to many of my constituents and many of your constituents in 3D who are opposed in a substantive manner to this retailer, and I agree with you 100%. Green Theory is going to be bad for the Palisades. It's going to be bad for the District of Columbia, and all of these dispensaries are going to be bad for our country. However, my colleagues have also heard from you and have recognized that their belief is that ANC is stuck with this mess that the DC government created. And, I thank Commissioner Horn and Commissioner Duncan for trying to come out with the best possible solution for us, given the horrible governance that we have in the City Hall. I'm going to, again, object to this because marijuana is illegal under the federal system. And until the Congress acts and makes it legal under the federal system, it's still illegal in the District of Columbia. I thank you for giving me the time, Commissioner Duncan.
Thank you very much. That I think that was important to hear. Do any of the commissioners want to say something? Commissioner Elkins.
Well, I very much appreciate all the comments here, and it's made me try to think, okay, what are the options in favor? What are the options available to this commission to act tonight? And I've got 4 of them. And I just want to list them so as we go forward in this discussion, we can talk about any of these that we find favorable. The first one I would call oppose this on the basis that this law is wrong and that we don't want these dispensaries anywhere in our neighborhood. I've worked with a little bit with this board that we're addressing this letter to. And I have to tell you that, in my opinion, but I'm only one person, that letter would be tossed in the trash can. Now we would feel good about writing it, perhaps, because we're taking a stand. But as some of my fellow commissioners know, I believe in trying to do something to change the government as opposed to just have performative opponents, opposition to something. So we can perform here and look great, but if we really just oppose this on the basis that we don't like this law, it will fall on, in my opinion, will fall on deaf ears. But that is an option, all right? The second option is to say that we are not opposed to these legal dispensaries. In fact, we appreciate the fact that the DC government, operating under very difficult circumstances, is trying to get rid of these I-71 gift stores, and they're trying to bring these things under regulation. And we commend that. But we think that in this particular situation, this is the wrong location. And we've heard the arguments about, because of the schools, that this is just the wrong location. Other places, even within 3D, could well be appropriate. But this is the wrong location. That's the second option. The third one is to express to the board that we're addressing this letter to, that we are concerned about our children, but the board has more experience than we have about effects of these dispensaries, because they have approved a number of them, and we would leave it to their judgment about whether, with our settlement agreement that we've negotiated, that in fact these children would be protected. And the fourth option is the one that Commissioner Horn has very carefully worked out, on the basis that we need a settlement agreement because we need to be able to intervene and control with it by complaints to the enforcement people about this facility. So we have a settlement agreement that we would have in place. So I'm not sure this is helpful, but I'm just trying to say, what are the, in my view, 4 options in favor of this commission tonight. And the one on the table is the fourth one, because I believe my fellow commissioner has put a lot of effort in working with this applicant to try to have as many enforceable by ABCA, enforceable provisions that, to the extent that we see bad behavior, we can control it. But I also have heard parents here tonight to say, well, part of this is not controllable. It's not controllable in the sense that it has an effect for children to see people potentially consuming cannabis. I do not have an opinion, because I don't have enough experience, about whether we really will see customers of this dispensary actually consuming in our neighborhood. I have to say I'm skeptical about that, but on the other hand, I heard that somebody was consuming, that we heard tonight, in front of the River School. So I don't know, but anyway, those are the 4 options that I see in front of us tonight, with the one on the table being, we need a settlement agreement in order to be able to have a hand in the game going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Elkins. I'm going to go through a couple of things that I heard in the comments that I'm hoping address. One is the smoke room, smoke garden. And what is a future of that? Now, we have gotten word from the operator, Mr. Martin, that they don't want a smoke room and they don't want a smoke garden because they don't want anybody smoking, and they don't want to be a recreational smoke room. And we had all agreed to put it in the settle agreement that they weren't going to ever apply for that, but ABCA won't recognize an agreement that has that in there. What I do know is if in the future they were ever going to request a smoke room or a smoke garden, they would have to get a whole separate license. And the ANC would certainly oppose that. I want to get rid of the notion that the ANC has no concerns here. When this first came to us, we have been on this since December, and we had massive concerns about this. Commissioner Horn especially, and me also, have spent a lot of time, particularly talking to the police. I've spoken with Captain Haskis. I speak with Officer McElwee almost on a weekly basis. And I had Captain Haskis try and look up some statistics for me, because we were talking about the crime around marijuana stores. And as far as we can tell, a licensed medical dispensary has never been robbed in the city. Now, they don't have that many licenses, whereas these I-71 stores that absolutely do bring armed robberies and crime, almost every single one of them have been robbed. I think the fact that we had one operating here in Palisades and it wasn't robbed may have been luck. But this is not, I feel, and I am confident that this is not going to be a recreational place for people to come and do drugs. I don't believe that. In terms of the traffic, the store that has been open there for many, many months, I was told had 20 to 30 people walk in daily. I don't believe that we are going to see any changes in traffic patterns apart from what was there, and that store is now closed. In terms of cash on hand, this was also a big concern to us. And if I say anything wrong, I would like Mr. Martin to raise his hand to correct me, but we have spoken to him, and we heard this at the Palisades Community Meeting Forum, that there are ways where people can use their debit cards to purchase this stuff and it becomes cashless. However, they will have cash there on the premises, and they are hiring a cash management company to come and take the cash in and out of the store. There's not going to be employees coming in and out with loads of cash. They're going to be using a cash management service to do that for them. I spent a significant amount of time talking to people who visit the licensed medical dispensaries, not the I-71 stores. And I asked, what is the atmosphere around these stores? Do you see people loitering? And they said, no, it is like walking into a pharmacy. It's like having a pharmacy in your neighborhood. And they may have been even skeptical people. And they told me it's like having a pharmacy. I do not believe that this is going to be a recreational place. That is personal feeling that I have. I do want to say to my other commissioners that I don't know if ABCA is going to, this is another thing I was going to say. I talked to the commissioner over in ANC 2C. I was a parent at Basis, so I know exactly where this location is. And I asked them to give me what the rundown. I will say, I'll be fully honest, I haven't read their letter that someone probably needs to mute. I haven't read their letter. So if another commissioner has and wants to chime in, but when I spoke to Mr. Lee, the commissioner there, he said that their biggest problem was not the location of the dispensary, it's that its entrance and sign was right across from the school. And he said that they were hoping that the dispensary would maybe move to the second floor or a move around to the side of the building. And it didn't sound to me like he thought he was going to get anywhere from actually moving the store. They were just going to try and make modifications to the storefront. That's what I heard from him today. So it's a little bit, it didn't sound like he thought that they were going to be able to prohibit the store from opening up just because it was across the street from Basis. So after all of my discernment of many, many months, and believe me, I have heard every single person who has come out for this call, because this was the reaction that we had when we first heard about this dispensary coming. I have decided that under current law, which we are here pondering with the District of Columbia, I get the whole federal thing. I'm assuming no one's going to sue me because I'm a volunteer elected official, that the best we can do is approve the application with a settlement agreement. Because if we oppose it and it comes anyway, we don't get the settlement agreement. The idea of the settlement agreement is that we have come to an agreement with this operator. Do I know 100% for sure that this operator is going to be the operator that I think he is? I don't know 100%, but I have spent a significant amount of time grilling them, asking them questions. I've put them in touch with the MPD. They're going to do a walkthrough of their security systems and protocols. And Captain Haskell said if they hold to the settlement agreement, he was confident that we are going to have the kind of establishment here that I envision. Those are the end of my comments.
On MacArthur Boulevard, Tricia.
If my question still has not been addressed, what experience does this applicant have running a medical marijuana dispensary?
So they, we can bring him up for that, but they've only had what, 11 licenses given in the entire city. There's so few people who have a license to actually run these.
Tricia, on MacArthur Boulevard?
The answer is no experience running a medical marijuana dispensary or an all cash business. Is that correct?
I don't know. I don't know.
Tricia.
I can hear you, Mr. Barnes. We are very formal here.
Okay, Councilwoman Duncan.
It's
on
Commissioner.
MacArthur Boulevard. Are we talking about MacArthur Boulevard? Why MacArthur Boulevard? That's what I'm asking.
Because that's where the applicant put in a license. We didn't pick the location.
We didn't
choose the
this.
ANC, Maryland.
We didn't choose this.
That's Commissioner Nowak, and
Yeah.
we didn't choose the location. The applicant did.
Yeah, but don't we have
That's
a
the
say in
answer to
that,
your
Commissioner Norwalk?
I think that we also need to remember that previous commissions have approved marijuana licenses on MacArthur Boulevard close to Key School.
So is that right?
We are working within the bounds of the law.
Precedent doesn't mean anything. We're here now in the present. Is it right? No, it's not right. And you know that, Tricia.
Please mute your microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm all the best.
Commissioner Nowak.
Thank you. So like Commissioner Duncan, I have heard and carefully considered not only the voices that we heard here tonight, but also a number of people who reached out to me off list with what they believe is an unpopular position of being either in support of the marijuana dispensary for their own use because of their libertarian views of the situation. And then a large percentage of people who were ambivalent, who said, I'm neither for nor against, but I'm neither for nor against. I want to go back to Ms. Martina Sullivan talked about her work with smoking, as did Commissioner Simkowitz. I do not smoke. I don't like the smell of cigarette smoke. And I am grateful to Commissioner Simkowitz for the work that he did to take it out of our bars and restaurants. My husband doesn't drink alcohol, and I'm sure that he would be happy if the restaurants that we go to did not serve alcohol. But this is not about our preferences and what we want to partake in. 37 states and the District of Columbia have said that marijuana is legal and should be treated in the same or similar way to alcohol. I think that it should be limited to adult use. I think that it should be available for use in your homes. I think that we should limit its use in public spaces. But I do strongly believe that under those parameters and we should be worrying about operating within the strictures that the ANC is here to do, which is to advise based upon the regulations as they are on the book. If we're concerned about illicit use or diversion, as Mr. Martin refers to it, we should be focused on not having dispensaries near college campuses and perhaps not near high schools. I don't think that the use or the availability of product near grade schools in the legal, regulated retail environment that's being discussed here is akin to open air drug markets. Nobody is looking to peddle their gummies in Key School under the parameter of green theory. Are there drug dealers who want to sell in grammar school parking lots? Of course there are, but that is not what we're here to assess tonight. So I will close there with thanking everyone who did speak tonight. Regardless of your views and whether you agree with me or disagree, I think this has been a very civil and respectful discussion with a difficult topic, and I thank you for your presence.
Mr. Vassallo, if you keep it short, I'll let you have a word. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tricia. You know, as an architect, I go in front of ANCs and review boards all the time, and you go through it multiple times to get the right solution. And this is the first time we're seeing this through the ANC. I feel like right now there's 73 people on this call, and we're rushing to judgment on an application that doesn't need to have a ruling tonight. I would recommend that this be deferred until further investigation can be analyzed to address the comments that you've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw that why do we have to decide this tonight? So ABCA has and Bernie, jump in here, a timeline that the clock is ticking. And if we don't discuss it here tonight, our time is going to be out. Is that?
Yes, the 45-day window will expire before our next ANC meeting. We have to take action today.
I would like to offer an amendment. My amendment is to add to the settlement agreement that there will be no visual references to marijuana visible outside the store, or if we are allowed to do that under ABCA rules. Do I have a second so we can have a discussion? Commissioner Simkowitz, give me a second. I know that we had talked about this with Mr. Martin, and we can bring him up here, but he had said that they were not going to have anything on the outside of the store that was going to indicate that there was cannabis there, except for their green sign with the white letters. And I'm wondering if we could codify that in the agreement.
If that's a question for me and that's within ABCA regulations, I would gladly sign on to that as part of the settlement agreement.
Thank you. Okay, so the exact motion on the floor is we are going to add into the settlement agreement that there will be no visual references to cannabis outside the store if ABCA allows us to put it in the agreement. Is there
Accept that as a friendly amendment?
Okay, friendly amendment. All right, it's part of the thing now. Does anyone else have any comments or ideas?
Am I allowed to speak, or were you only asking about commissioners, Tricia?
Yeah, can I move the question, Commissioner? I'd like to move the question.
I think, Ms. Shaw, I'm sorry, we are past that point of public
Okay.
comment. I'm sorry.
I just liked Mr. Elkins' interim. This is the wrong location. That he said we can do something, say we get it, it's the law, but this is the wrong location, and that's what we're going on record as. But I'll shut up now.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I see that point. But anyway, someone has asked to call the question. So unless there is any other commissioners that are against that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know you talked to one of the commissioners from 2C, and they sent their, letter protesting like 2 months ago. Have they gotten any, did that ABCA hearing like happen yet? Or do we not know what's going to happen with that application?
That there is some kind of meeting with ABCA next week. Funny enough, he was asking about our situation here, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think you're going to have any problem." I was like, "Isn't that easy to say?" So, yes, and just so people know, the ANC has been talking about this since December. The applicant came and gave a whole presentation. Yeah, we've been at this for a very long time, and the ANC has been discussing it for a very long time.
And for people that are curious, the minutes are posted on our website. So if you'd like to go back and review those, you may.
And those meetings were open to the public, so it's not as though it was closed door meetings.
Commissioner Elkins?
I'm sorry, I haven't formulated this well in my mind yet, but I'm wondering whether, assuming that I'm reading the tea leaves that the commission is that my colleagues are in favor of the current letter, whether we might want to add some paragraph that says we've had considerable concern on the part of the public about whether in fact the presence of this facility will have an adverse effect on the neighborhood in ways that at this point we cannot measure, but we ANC 3D and the neighborhood will be monitoring this very carefully and reserve the right. We hope, well, we can't reserve a right, but we will bring to the attention of both the applicant and ABCA if we see that in fact this does have adverse effects on the neighborhood. I mean, some way of our present letter reaches the agreement that we have concluded that it's not likely to have a significant impact on peace, order, and quiet, etc. And that may well be true as of this moment, but I think our neighbors are raising the issue of what happens in the future if that's not true. We can't see into the future too well, so maybe some way of being able to come back to ABCA later in some kind of protest to say this has had a very negative impact on our neighborhood that we did not anticipate, but that our neighbors were concerned about, and that we'd like this applicant to move elsewhere. I think I would feel, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact language, but I would feel more comfortable about a letter that did that.
Looking around, I see some other commissioners nodding their heads. So, go ahead, Commissioner Horn.
I don't think that we can say that we will protest in the future. We can certainly bring objections that there are violations, but they grant the license and then they could take it away only if the rules are broken, including the rules of our settlement agreement. So, I mean, we could have some language, but I don't think the language can say that we might come back later for, to protest. It's just not part of the process.
I agree with you, Commissioner, legally, but I do think that at this stage of the district's regulation of cannabis, everyone, including ABCA, is working in a new territory, feeling its way. And of course, we can always come back no matter what we say in our letter. But I personally would find it easier to come back to the ABCA and say, wait, there's a problem here, if we flagged it in the first place. I mean, I do think our neighbors have made a very strong case that this is an unusual neighborhood with all the schools. And while on the merits, we believe that this facility, because of the way it's going to operate, will not likely result in, as we say in the letter, will not likely result in a problem. We're all of us, neighbors and commissioners, are operating in a situation in which we don't really have a lot of experience. And we're just doing the best we can. And I would just feel better if we flag this so that we could come back and say, well, our neighbors alerted us to this. We proceeded to go ahead and allow this facility, but lo and behold, they were right. And we need to do something about this. And I grant you that the rules are not receptive to that, Bernie, but that doesn't mean we can't come back. So,
Commissioner Elkins, are you not feeling comfortable with paragraph number 9, which states that the applicant agrees to abide by all ABCA regulations as well as the commitments in the settlement agreement?
Oh, I'm happy with
and that in their failure to do so constitute grounds for ANC 3D to file a complaint with the board.
Absolutely. I'm very happy with those provisions. What I think our neighbors are raising with us is there's something else about the possible impact of this facility, which are not really covered directly by those provisions. They do talk about the peace, order, and quiet of the relevant area. Those are very broad terms, but I think that's what they're directing them their comments to. And we're doing the best we can to say, well, this applicant has signed up on our settlement agreement, et cetera, and we think they're going to do a good job, but they are not totally in control of the impact of their business on the peace, order, and quiet of our neighborhood, particularly this neighborhood. And we are essentially putting down a marker that we're going to be watching to see that. And we may come back and find an opportunity to protest on the basis that this facility, even given its good faith operation, is in fact having an adverse effect on the peace, quiet, and order of our neighborhood. We don't think it's going to happen, but we may be back.
We could say that we're going to be vigilant.
Right.
But a protest is a particular legal thing in this law, and that we cannot protest after the 45-day period, but we can be vigilant and insist upon the requirements be met.
But Commissioner Horn, isn't there an opportunity in the future? And I think the regulations I'm familiar with were still in draft at the time I was looking at them. So I don't know what the final rule is, but there is an opportunity at a certain point where this applicant has to come back to renew its license, just like a restaurant or.
Yeah. Yes, just like a restaurant.
Okay, and at that point, having been vigilant and heard from our community, we could at that point, am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We would protest on the basis of its having an impact on the peace, order, and quiet of our neighborhood, which is what we're a little worried about at this point.
When would that be? When would they renew it?
I'm sorry.
Well, when would that be? When would they come around to renew it? Like how long of a time period would we have?
1 year, I think it may be 3 years. Do you happen to know, Commissioner Horn? When the
I don't. I think Mr. Martin would know. I think it's 3 years.
Mr. Martin, do you know when would be the first time we could protest about your performance?
Our license.
The impact of your facility?
Anybody could email ABCA at any time and voice displeasure with our operation. Our license will be good for 3 years, and then we can opt to renew it at that point. I personally thought it was wise on the commission's perspective to include the language around the opportunity to cure, and it spells out that there is guidelines in place for the ANC to file complaints with ABCA and to ask for the storefront to be investigated. So there are avenues. I think protest is kind of a misnomer in this case, but there are avenues for feedback from the ANC to ABCA.
So I think in those terms, I don't think we would be protesting. It's unlikely we'd be protesting that the applicant has violated the settlement agreement, because I accept their good faith in agreeing to the settlement agreement. What we would be saying is that we misestimated, and it's not surprising that we misestimated because the city doesn't have a lot of experience about the impact on the peace, quiet, and I keep forgetting the last word, and quiet of the community, and that, but certainly at a 3-year period, that would be a very valid basis. The ABC may not enjoy, may not suffer us to make such a protest in between, but and we could do that in any case, no matter what we say in this letter. Don't get me wrong, but if I were going in front of them next year or 3 years from now, I'd like to be able to refer back to this letter and say, we operated under lack of full information about what the impact might be of these dispensaries because the city has not had much experience on that. And that we were very concerned about this because this is a very sensitive location because of the school. And lo and behold, here's our chapter and verse about what all the impacts have been, and we protest.
If they violate the settlement agreement, can we bring that up before they renew their license? I assume we can, right? So
Yes.
the best thing we can do is to include this all in the settlement. And I think the third paragraph is the place where we want to do this. I mean, the fundamental thing that might violate the peace, order, and quiet of our neighborhood, I think, is people consuming marijuana, whether it be smoking or taking an edible or whatever in the surrounding areas. So I think if we added a sentence about like consuming cannabis products violating the peace, order, and quiet in the settlement, that would be better maybe. But I do think that if they adhere to the settlement, like actually strictly, if they do provide the enforcement and police the nearby, maybe we should define nearby plaza or nearby area stronger, so we know exactly what area we are tasking with them to police. Given that this is probably the main issue that most people have here, will be that people will come and not only buy from the store but consume in the neighborhood surrounding it. So, is that do we want to actually define, maybe include the alley that people are concerned about, to make sure that people don't, that this is not like a way for them to get out of the settlement, and the idea of peace, order, and quiet in the neighborhood not being violated by consuming marijuana around the establishment?
I
I
think
think
that's
it's
certainly
important to include the rear of the building.
Okay, yeah.
I don't, but
Yeah.
in fairness, I think that's a good idea, and I would certainly support that. But I don't think that's addressing what we heard from our neighbors tonight, besides the alley. I think what we're hearing is that they are concerned about the impact in the larger area, which we can't honestly ask the applicant to police. I mean, they'd have to have a whole bunch of staff people out there. Anybody would reasonably expect them to do. I think what we're talking about is something broader than that, which all of us are concerned about, but have no basis in which to predict. And all I'm suggesting is we include in our letter something that we could refer back to at the time, if we do feel we ever have to bring a complaint that this facility is having an adverse effect on our neighborhood and it's in the wrong location.
Okay, did you want to come up with an exact sentence? And while you're doing that, to address some of the comments, but particularly Commissioner Simkowitz's ever consistent reminder that this law, DC's law, violates federal law when it comes to marijuana regulation. In our second to last paragraph, where it says, in summary, with this agreement, the ANC believes that blah, 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 as listed in DC code section, blah, blah, blah. We could say, but ANC would like to acknowledge that this DC law likely violates federal law. Just putting it out there.
Respectfully, I don't think we're going to.
Commissioner Duncan, thank you, but I mean, I think everybody knows that by this point.
Okay.
Really the problem is that DC did this. They shouldn't have done it, but they did, and we're stuck with it. I would recommend everybody talk to their council member, because this is above our pay grade, significantly above our pay grade.
Did you want to make an amendment, Chuck?
Yes, I'm writing it right now. If you could give me a
Okay.
couple minutes.
Okay. Can I offer another friendly amendment, Commissioner Horn? In the third paragraph, where it says, after examining this matter, ANC 3D has concluded. Can we say ANC 3D anticipates that this store?
It's a good one. Good one.
Okay. Catherine, I'm making a note of this so that we can change the wording in the third paragraph to change the word concluded to anticipates. And then we'll change the syntax after that so it makes sense. Commissioner Elkins, no rush, but you're up whenever you're ready.
I'm almost there.
Okay.
I don't type.
No rush, no rush.
Mr. Martin, I have a question for you, if you're still with us.
Of course, Commissioner, I'm with you.
Would you be willing to expand your exterior surveillance to include the alley in the rear of the property as well as the plaza in the front?
We would. That's part of our commitment to applying to the program that's outlined in the settlement agreement as well. For the rebate program that would cover exterior facing cameras, which would also not only be impactful to our business, but the police could request that surveillance for ancillary crimes. So we've already committed to that as well.
Okay, thank you. So as a reminder to community members, although the ANC is the only one that can weigh in on the licensing of this applicant, any community member can make a complaint to ABCA if the business is open and operating and behaving in a manner that is problematic. There is a process for community input on that, and I think any individual can submit an ABCA complaint.
Madam Chairman, I have shared some very quickly typed material. Can everybody see it?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, Commissioner Elkins, just for formality, do you want to make a motion?
My first request would be of Commissioner Horn is whether he would accept this as a friendly amendment.
I don't see a problem with it. Let me read it one more time and let other people read it and see if they have a problem with it.
Do you have a specific place in the letter you think this might be ideally inserted? Do you think the second paragraph or like towards the end? Or I guess
ask the help of my fellow commissioners to help me in this regard.
I think I would say after the paragraph that starts with ANC 3D would be.
So between the third and fourth paragraph, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, and I would just want to read the two together to see if there's any duplicative, like we might be able to just make sure that we don't have the same sentences in both paragraphs. Because we do talk about potential adverse impacts in that existing paragraph. So let's just not be repetitive.
Yes, maybe eliminate if we put it there right after the paragraph ANC 3D.
Yeah.
Eliminate the first sentence. And say, however, let's see. Oh, just a
okay, I see where you're going. I see where you're going.
Yep, yep.
So start the second sentence. I'm going to.
Yep. Right there.
No time.
However.
So delete that first sentence, right? Yep. Yep, I think that looks good. I would take out the second however then, because you start the next sentence with however as well.
How about that?
Okay.
There's a concern, and I might agree with in the last sentence, is serious impact on the peace maybe we should say negative impact on the piece or negative measurable.
Sure.
So I ask again to Commissioner Horn, whether this is a friendly or an unfriendly amendment.
I don't see a problem with it if other people don't see a problem with it.
I would have voted yes.
Could I make one further suggestion to you, Commissioner Horn, for your consideration? In the next to last paragraph, in summary, with this agreement, the ANC currently believes the proposed establishment is not likely to have a significant impact.
Sure.
Okay, as that's a friendly amendment, I need to write this down. In summary, with this agreement, the ANC currently believes. So between ANC and believes, we will add the word currently.
I think that gives us ability to say, we are all learning. And we reserve, and implied, we reserve to come back and tell you that we have now learned that we were wrong.
All right, so 3 friendly amendments.
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much for putting that together so quickly. Any other comments? All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
I
As
think we need to
amended.
do a roll call. Commissioner
Okay.
Duncan.
Catherine, can you call the roll? We usually start with 3D01.
Happy to do so. 3D01,
Aye.
3D02,
Aye.
3D03,
Aye.
3D04,
Aye.
3D05,
Aye.
3D06,
Aye.
and finally 3D07.
No.
All
The
right.
motion passes 6-1 to 0. Motion on the floor is to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simkowitz adjourns. I would like to sincerely thank everyone and their comments. And I want to put this out to the community that if these fears and scenarios are realized, the ANC is going to be here and working with Green Theory and the community to make it right. I personally make that commitment. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor to adjourn? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much.